I wanted to talk to you about this great teacher and about my retreat, which I did for about 3 or 4 days. I stayed kind of really deep in these practices around this great teacher named Shantideva. Now, Shantideva wrote one of the most important texts in the whole of the Buddhist tradition. All of the great traditions, whether it's Zen or Tibetan Buddhism or Thailand or anywhere in the world, this text is beloved. And this particular teacher is one of the most important and beloved teachers. Okay. And I wanted to share a little bit about his life and then share a little bit about the core of what he was teaching, because his book that he wrote was published in the 8th century in northern India. So just imagine that. We're in what, the 21st century? So this book has been carried since the 8th century, ancient India, right? And it was written down at a college called Nalanda University, which was a very, very famous college where a lot of great yogis and scholars and people who are practicing awakening. This is the key, awakening. And what are the paths? What are the mechanisms toward liberation? You know, because that's the road that we're traversing right now. What is freedom? What is real freedom? I don't want that temporary freedom anymore, right? The freedom of a nice meal, the freedom of a short vacation. I want something that's lasting, right? What is real freedom mean? And so these are what these scholars were debating. Where's the end of suffering, right? Where's the end of suffering found? In the midst of these tsunamis of greed, hatred, and delusion, what is ultimate refuge? Right? What is lasting refuge? And these were the questions that I've been grappling with in the midst of the great turning right now, because not only is like, where is my own refuge, but how do I then provide that for others? What are the paths that we have available? And so a lot of us, we go back in order to go forward. We look at these texts. And one thing about me, and that my friends know, is that I love to study. It's something that I've done since I was a child. Even when I was 6 years old, do you know, I had a memory. I was talking to my mother. My first self-help book was a book by Wayne Dyer. I was in the 4th grade. It was called Real Magic. And I remember actually trying to meditate because I was at home from school. My mother was always at work. I was sick that day, and she had taken it from the library, you know, rented it at the library. And I remember being like, this is a very important book, and sitting down reading it all day. I didn't know what it was about, but I liked it. And I remember even trying to meditate on her bed, counting down from 10 to 1. And I was like, wow, this is really hard not to think about things. And I was trying even then to make sense of the suffering in my own family. So this topic of suffering and liberation, this is the real heart's journey. The heart wants to be free, right? The heart is boundless, right? It's infinite. And so it longs to be free, and it knows the way to freedom. So that's why I love the Buddhist tradition, and I love all traditions, but I like some way that Buddha talked about the path because it's so laid out. It makes sense. But I also love the Bhagavad Gita. As many of you know, I'm going to be giving a series of talks on the Bhagavad Gita because that text is also incredible. And it starts with Arjuna and Krishna on a battlefield. That's where the whole text opens up. And Arjuna's having to fight his people that are against him, and they're on a battlefield, but God is there. And the whole text is this dance of this battlefield moment. So that also feels very relevant to right now, right? So I encourage you that we go and we look at these ancient texts and we start thinking about the messages of what they're teaching us. So Shantideva was this incredible teacher from the 8th century. And he had a life very similar to the Siddhartha's life. He was born to a very wealthy family in northern India, the highest class of people. You know, there was that caste system always going. He was like the highest Brahmin, and he was the heir to a throne in a dynasty. And they say that on the night before he was going to get married, Tara came to him and said, "Run." Don't even get married and get into this palace life and politics, and run. And then they also say that as his mother came to give him a ceremonial bath, she scalded him with hot water. And he said, "Why are you scalding me?" And she said, "If you think this hurts, try being the king." And she also encouraged him, "Run." And so he left. He left in the middle of the night. He took off, right? Before all his enthronements and all these things are, and you know, all of that stuff. Before the job started. You know that feeling we get when we get a job? We're like, maybe, I don't know, I should run away from this. And before we get locked down into the program, right? And so he runs away, and he ends up at this incredible college. And the college was all monastics practicing. It was all a college of male monastic practitioners. And he begins to practice there. But here's the funny part about the story. He's practicing there, but everybody turns against him because he never goes to classes. And they start saying he never even studies. And they said he mastered these arts of sleeping, eating, and going to the bathroom, right? They would tease him. They would say, "That's all you ever do here. You know, you're not a real scholar." So one day they asked him to give a talk. And so they all underestimated him. I guess that's the funny thing about this, right? So they said that they asked him to give a talk, and they were teasing him. They thought they were going to humiliate him a little bit, right? "Oh, he hasn't studied anything. Sure, you give the big talk. Tell us everything you know." And so he sits up on the stage, and for the next hours, he gives this particular teaching called the Bodhisattva Way of Life. And this teaching is reported for those who read it, those who study it, is the direct path to liberation. It's the mind of a Buddha. It's the mindset. So this book that they said as he was giving the talk, they wrote that he was elevating in the air as he was ending it, right? He was elevating in the air. And then at the very last word, they just heard the sound and he disappeared. And so talk about like a mic drop moment, right? He disappears and they all went, "Oh my gosh." And they had been writing it down. And then later some scholars from the school, they went and found him in a cave and asked him, "Is this exactly the text?" And that particular text has been translated all the way to this day. And so the Bodhisattva Way of Life, as its core message, which is what I want to bring to you all tonight, for those of you who have not studied this great text, is complicated. It is. It's been translated, and so it's vast. I've read it probably 400 times, and now I went back to the beginning again. And that's the kind of repetition that we need right now. These voices and this tsunami is so distracting. It's so all-consuming, and it's so delusional that we naturally, when we're standing in front of it for 5 minutes, we forget all the things we know, right? It's just like a rainstorm, right? And if you go out in the rain, no matter how many umbrellas you have and how many, jackets and waterproof boots you have, you get wet still. There's a certain amount of you that will get wet just from the rain coming down so hard. So no matter what we do, we're going to get wet by this storm. It gets in our clothes, right? It gets in our bones. So we have to constantly be kind of drying it out, shaking it out, putting it outside. Do people know what I mean by this, right? We have to constantly kind of combat the energy of that. And so this particular text lays out the practice of awakening and how to practice Because what we really want to do with our heart medicine is we're not just sitting around for thousands of years just doing metta for ourselves. There's a moment where we're activated out into the world, right? This isn't meant to be a practice that we do for just ourselves alone, right? We're doing it now, but eventually that's the love that carries us out into the world, right? To be of service to others. Without service to humanity, our compassion is not really fully complete, right? We practice so that we can go out and be a light in the world. We practice, we find our freedom, and then we go out, and when we're ready, we can then help other people. We awaken, we guide, and then we build. This is what's going to be needed in 2026, right? I feel like first what we're doing is awakening. Man, this storm is going to go on all year, and we're going to just be, kind of trying not to get wet. We go out, we have our rain hats on, boots, some of us will be better equipped than others, but we stay dry and we awaken this quality that Shantideva talked about, the awakened mind. Bodhi means enlightenment, and Chitta means mind. The enlightened mind. What is the enlightened mind? It's this idea that we become Buddhas, not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of all beings. And this is also something I want to share with you, is that even though what's so hard, I think, for us to grasp, and I've been in this tangle with Harriet Tubman over this. Harriet and I go round and round and round, because she always is reminding me that human beings are so much more powerful than they know. Right? And the way we give up power is believing we don't have any, right? Believing that we're small. We don't believe that we have the seed of full awakening in us. We kind of think it, but we're like, well, I have a lot, all we see is the neurotic side, but that's just temporary, right? Those are just habits of mind. That's not the true nature of our hearts. Our hearts are infinite. But we don't see that. And I keep wondering how it is that we can together see each other's light and help to amplify that, right? How do we begin to see our power in each other, cultivate that with a lot of wisdom and clarity, not in an ego way, but in a truthful way, that we are all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That's what I used to love so much about the Dharma. We are all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but we just forgot. We're in a state of sleepiness. We're in a frozen state. We're remembering. But this remembering is so hard when there's a tsunami of delusion every second that's telling you to forget. That's what is so challenging about this moment for all of us. Everybody, this massive amount of erasing who we are. It's just greed, a hatred, delusion, and it's raining down. It's hard to remember and hear ourselves. If our true nature was being amplified hour after hour, just think how easy it would be. We'd all be like, oh, right, we're all compassionate beings. We're here to love and care for each other. You don't even hear this in school, This is something you have to seek out. Right? This is something we seek out because humanity is in this, there is a real tipping point here, everybody, right? There's going to be this dividing, two tectonic plates, right? And this side is going to go to that end, and this side is going to go to the other end, at least on the 3D level, consciousness-wise. So we need to think about the practices of liberation. And Shantideva lays out in this book, it's a short book of chapters. Each chapter grows, and each chapter talks about the path of the Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva makes a vow that they will practice awakening so that they can be a true guide for others. Right? It's almost like I said, I'm going to go to medical school and I'm going to study so that I can be a great doctor and then go out and help people. But there's a period where we have to undertake a kind of study. And I want to talk about these 6 practices of the Bodhisattva. I'm going to mention them here because I'm going to start to unpack them on Tuesday nights. For the next 6 nights, I'm going to take on a different aspect of the heart. But the practices that we undergo, and they call them perfection practices. So we perfect these 6 qualities: generosity, ethical conduct, patience, joyful effort, right? Diligence, but a kind of effort that's joyful. We call meditation and wisdom, right? And what's laid out in this text is that these 6 qualities, they become superpowers, right? It's not just the power of generosity, but it's the huge power of generosity. It becomes a superpower, right? It reminds me a little bit about like Jesus in the Bible, where, he was like feeding the people, jumping into the river to feed the people fish, but then it's like an endless bounty comes out, right? He can manifest this huge amounts, right, of generosity. And then we think about ethics, how important ethical conduct is right now, how that becomes a superpower. Patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom, right? These are all, when we're rooting them in the heart, they become superpowered. So this is the thing, we are mixing our hearts. We are creating a strong heart so that we can go out and be agents of change in the world. We can be a light onto the world. We can actually carry a movement forward of love and compassion. Everybody, this is my dream, is to help people together. We access this heart energy that Harriet said fueled her, that all these great masters, that Dr. King, that soul force, right? And what we do is we create a lane, right, through that cuts through this delusion, right? And we open the road up for many beings to come through, many beings to take refuge. The heart itself is a great light. They always talk about in these texts, it's like the sun. So this Shantideva retreat that I was doing, I was practicing and remembering and writing down even more my understanding and studying and clarifying, then meditating on it. That's what I was doing. You take the text, you study, you recite, and then you pray over it. You kind of allow it to come into your body, this higher wisdom. And we make vows. May I get on the path of awakening. Even a vow like this, may I heal my heart so that I can be of benefit to other beings. That's a beautiful vow. That's like an aspirational vow of the Bodhisattva. May I awaken my good heart so that I could be a light in this world. I love that vow, right? May I awaken my heart so that I may be a light onto others in this world. And you don't have to try to do it now. You can, but what we're doing right now is we're in the awakening of it, awakening to the true power of the heart, right? And that we have to see it, we have to feel it, we have to root down so that when we go out into the tsunami, we're not swept up in the flood, right? That we got everything we need. We're walking out and we got a super powered device surrounding us. We have protection, so we head out right into the storm and we can sail against it and we don't get wet and we're not falling down and we're not getting swept away. We awaken our hearts for that. There are beings who need our light right now. And I think so much about these young people caught up in all of the madness of what these elders are doing, right? And the sadness that I see in so many eyes. And right now, that is my motivation. May I awaken my heart. And that is what the Bodhisattva way of life is. We use our own awakening and we motivate ourselves with the vow. For the benefit of others, I will awaken. And then we take as long as we need. If you need to go to 5 more years of therapy, do it. Whatever it is that you need, but you dedicate it to that. You dedicate everything to this path. And with that, it becomes a very powerful doorway. We cross over into the energy with the other bodhisattvas. And every action then becomes a blessing. Every time you need to take a break, may I pause and rest for the benefit of all beings. May I drink this green juice for the benefit of all beings. Everything becomes like a mantra, right? Every practice you're honing for that moment. My heart one day fully open so that I can be led out and be of support to awakening humanity. Again, everybody, we are preparing for when they're gonna, as we know that this tsunami is gonna go on for some time, but it will stop. And then who will be there? We want our fierce hearts to be there to pick up the pieces to build new systems, right? So it's easy to tear down. That's easy. Destroy something, right? But hard is to build something new based on this love and compassion. And it needs the visionaries and the good hearts of many of us working together to create this new world, this great shift into something that's life sustaining, right? That's what we're moving into, is the life sustaining era.